On a sunny morning in Sarajevo, a city shimmering on the edge of empires, destiny took a fateful turn. It was June 28, 1914, a date etched in infamy. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his beloved wife Sophie arrived in the Bosnian capital. Their visit, intended as a show of imperial strength, would ignite a powder keg of long-simmering tensions. As the Archduke's motorcade navigated the bustling streets, a young Serbian nationalist, Gavrilo Princip, seized his moment. A shot rang out, echoing through the ages, forever altering the course of history. The Archduke and his wife lay dead, victims of an assassination that would plunge Europe into the abyss of war. The world watched in disbelief as the fragile peace, painstakingly maintained for decades, shattered into a million pieces. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the spark, but the tinder had been laid long before that fateful day in Sarajevo. Europe, a patchwork of empires and nation-states, was a powder keg awaiting ignition. A complex web of alliances, forged in secrecy and bound by mutual suspicion, entangled the great powers. Germany, fearing encirclement, pledged support to Austria-Hungary. Russia, champion of Slavic nationalism, stood ready to defend Serbia. France, eager to reclaim its lost territories from Germany, and Great Britain, wary of any power challenging its dominance, completed the opposing alliances. This intricate network of treaties and agreements meant to deter aggression instead became a catalyst for war. When Austria-Hungary, emboldened by German support, issued an ultimatum to Serbia, the gears of war began to grind, dragging nation after nation into the impending conflict. August 1914, a month after the assassination in Sarajevo, Europe descended into the inferno of war. Germany, its Schlieffen Plan, meticulously crafted for a two-front war, struck first. German armies, a grey tide of men and machines, stormed into neutral Belgium, violating its neutrality and shocking the world. Great Britain, its honour and strategic interests threatened, declared war on Germany. The lamps were going out all over Europe, British Foreign Secretary Sir Edward Grey famously lamented, and we shall not see them lit again in our lifetime. The continent, once a beacon of progress and enlightenment, was consumed by the fires of war. On the Eastern Front, Russian armies mobilized with surprising speed, clashing with German and Austro-Hungarian forces in a series of bloody battles. The world watched in horror as the guns of August unleashed a maelstrom of unprecedented violence and destruction. The Western Front, a jagged scar stretching from the North Sea to the Swiss Alps, became the defining theatre of World War I. It was a war unlike any before it, a brutal stalemate where millions of men clashed in a nightmarish landscape of trenches, barbed wire and machine guns. Gone were the romantic notions of glorious charges and swift victories. This was a war of attrition, a slow, grinding struggle for every inch of mud-soaked ground. New technologies of war, from poison gas to tanks, added to the horrors, transforming the battlefield into a charnel house. The soldiers, many of them young volunteers, endured unimaginable hardships, living and dying in the trenches, their lives sacrificed on the altar of nationalism and imperial ambition. Section 5. Verdun and the Somme, Factories of Death. Two battles etched in blood and memory came to symbolize the utter futility and horror of the Western Front, Verdun and the Somme. These battles were not just military engagements, they were grueling tests of endurance and willpower. In 1916 at Verdun, the Germans launched a massive offensive, determined to bleed the French army white. The battle was intended to be a war of attrition, aiming to inflict maximum casualties. "They shall not pass," became the rallying cry of the French defenders as they fought with desperate courage against wave after wave of German attacks. The French soldiers, despite being outnumbered and outgunned, held their ground with unyielding determination. Months of relentless fighting turned the landscape into a lunar wasteland, littered with the bodies of hundreds of thousands of soldiers. The once green fields were now a desolate expanse of mud and blood. Later that year, along the Somme River, the British launched their own offensive, hoping to break the stalemate and relieve the pressure on the French at Verdun. The British High Command believed that a decisive victory here could turn the tide of the war. The first day of the Somme, July 1st, 1916, remains the bloodiest day in British military history. The scale of the carnage was unprecedented and left an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. Over 57,000 British soldiers became casualties on that single day, mowed down by German machine guns and artillery. The human cost was staggering, and the battle would drag on for months, with little to show for the immense sacrifice. Section 6, A World at War. Total War and its toll. World War I was not confined to the battlefields of Europe. The conflict, fueled by imperial ambitions and global rivalries, spread its tentacles across the globe. From the deserts of the Middle East to the jungles of Africa and the islands of the Pacific, the war raged on. The Ottoman Empire, allied with Germany and Austria-Hungary, became embroiled in a struggle for survival, facing internal revolts and external pressures. The Armenian genocide, a horrific chapter in human history, unfolded within the Ottoman Empire, a grim testament to the brutality unleashed by the war. On the home fronts, the war effort demanded unprecedented sacrifices. Governments mobilized their economies for war production, transforming factories into arsenals and farms into battlefields. Women, stepping into roles traditionally held by men, became vital contributors to the war effort, working in factories, hospitals, and government offices. Section 7, The Collapse of Empires, A New World Order. By 1917, the war had entered its fourth, grueling year. The initial enthusiasm had long faded, replaced by a grim determination to survive. Exhaustion and disillusionment gripped all sides. Soldiers, once full of hope, now faced the harsh realities of endless conflict. The entry of the United States into the war in April 1917 tipped the balance in favor of the Allies. American involvement brought fresh energy and resources. The arrival of fresh American troops and resources provided a much-needed morale boost and hastened the end of the conflict. The Allies felt a renewed sense of hope. In 1918, Germany, its army on the verge of collapse and its home front facing starvation, sued for peace. The situation had become untenable. The armistice, signed on November 11, 1918, brought an end to the fighting. The world took a collective sigh of relief. The world rejoiced, but the cost of victory was staggering. Families were torn apart and entire communities were forever changed. Millions lay dead. Empires crumbled and a continent lay in ruins. The scars of war were visible everywhere. The war shattered the old world order, sweeping away centuries-old dynasties and redrawing the map of Europe. The political landscape was forever altered. The Austro-Hungarian, Russian, Ottoman and German empires, once dominant forces on the world stage, lay in ruins, replaced by a patchwork of new nations struggling to find their place in the post-war world. The future was uncertain and the world had to navigate a new and complex reality. Section 8, The Treaty of Versailles, Seeds of Resentment. The Paris Peace Conference, convened in 1919 to negotiate the terms of peace, aimed to prevent another global conflict. The Treaty of Versailles, the most consequential of the peace treaties, imposed harsh penalties on Germany. Germany, deemed solely responsible for the war, was forced to cede territory, disarm its military and pay crippling reparations to the victors. The treaty, while intended to ensure lasting peace, sowed the seeds of resentment and instability. Germany, humiliated and economically crippled, became fertile ground for extremist ideologies that would plague the world in the decades to come. The treaty's failure to address the underlying causes of the war, such as nationalism, imperialism, and the balance of power, created a fragile peace, vulnerable to future conflicts. Section 9, The Enduring Legacy, A World Forever Changed. World War I, often referred to as the Great War, left an enduring legacy on the 20th century and beyond. It was a conflict of unprecedented scale and devastation. The war's unprecedented scale of death and destruction shattered the illusion of progress and reason that had characterized the pre-war era. Cities were reduced to rubble, and nature itself bore the scars of human conflict. The conflict reshaped the political and social landscape of the world, accelerating the rise of new ideologies from communism to fascism and altering the course of history in ways that are still felt today. It also fueled anti-colonial movements across the globe, inspiring people to fight for their independence and self-determination. The war's technological innovations, from airplanes to machine guns, revolutionized the nature of warfare. making it more lethal and impersonal. Trench warfare became a symbol of the brutal and stagnant nature of the conflict. The trauma of war left an indelible mark on an entire generation, with countless soldiers and civilians alike bearing the psychological scars of the conflict. Its echoes reverberated through literature, art, and music, influencing countless works and shaping cultural expressions for decades to come. The lessons of World War I, though often ignored, continue to resonate in the 21st century. The dangers of unchecked nationalism, the importance of diplomacy, and the fragility of peace remain as relevant today as they were in the aftermath of the Great War. The hope for a better future lies in remembering and learning from the past.